The Tier 13 hull Pathfinder is here, and today I want to go through a build for this, as well as my upgrade strategy for the fleet and a few other notes. Hey everyone, Derpy here, welcome back to another Battle Pirates video. As I get started, I do want to say that you can use the chapters feature on YouTube to jump to whatever section you are interested in. Starting out is the build stock. This is something that you all have access to totally for free, linked in the description of all my YouTube videos. You can get the hash codes for any ship that you would like that I have something out there. I'm working on adding some turrets and stuff like that. And this is made possible by channel members. If you want your name on here, click the join button below the video. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the Pathfinder build, at least my upgrade strategy. So this is actually going to be a 3-month raid cycle, which is pretty new. Battle Pirates is going to go through a lot of changes. Pillage events, etc. are going away. Bounty event is getting split up into 2 and is changing, but more on that in a future video. For this particular raid, I'm planning on building 3 normal ships plus the flagship, which is the same that I usually do. Now my 3 normal ships are going to be at a very high upgrade level. I have 3 of them at U2 already, although they don't have any weapons, etc. in there. I'm going to get these 3 to U3 and then 1 to X1 before the raid even starts by using the 1 pillage participation prize plus the 5 tokens. Anyway, that's going to be the standard that I've done for a while now. Is these 3 ships at U3 and flagship as high as I can get it. We are still going to get the flagship in pillage, but that may change for the next ship, and like I mentioned, this is a 3-month cycle, so anything you can do to get these guys upgraded will help you out in not just 2 raids, but will help you out in 3. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the build. Now, as you can see here, the ships are not completely ranked, and they actually have nothing on them. I did miss most of EXP weekend, and it's pretty hard to rank up the ships when you're not there. I wish Kixeye would change this in the future and maybe change how the EXP works or allow you to get enough EXP in the TLCs to get these all the way up here. I will be able to finish them out with tokens from that or tokens in the first hour of the raid, but it is a little bit annoying. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the build. I do have 1 weapon on, so it's not going to be completely normal. The build times you see are not going to be completely standard. Now, I'm actually going to go over the stats of the ship first. So U1, of course, brings out a heavy weapon, which started out not very good. They have buffed it just a little bit, so the heavy weapon is now kind of worth putting on here. You get more survival at U2, which is nice. You get some damage at U2, which is also good, and then a decrease in spread, which is good. Your shots are more tightly clustered around the specific target you're shooting at. U3, it's kind of hard to read here, but gives you survival, more of that, which is good. Reload, which of course is nice. Countermeasure reload, anti-mortar, and projectile speed. All these things are pretty good things out here. Note the anti-mortar reload is only at U3, so you might want to get your Gale Ship up to U3 first, or your Cormorant Ship up to U3 first. I'm going to build 1 Gale Ship, 1 Cormorant Ship, and then the rest, counting the flagship, will be damage ships. Just keep that in mind as we're going throughout things here. Also, I should mention that these stats and the upgrades don't work like specials, they just modify the base stats on the ship if you're interested in any of that stuff. Now, one interesting thing that comes out with the ship is that it does have a few auras. There is a T-closed formation stacking aura. That's kind of a weird name. This ship has a lot of weird names for specials, but we'll get into that shortly. And it does give survival and stuff like that. Now, the other thing is this microsonic depth charge gives a very, very small field, depth charge damage field essentially, and it's not affected by pretty much anything you have here, and the range is not used for AI targeting. Now, I do notice that the weapon field shows up constantly the entire time, which I don't like because it's a 360 arc. If it was a forward-facing arc, that would be okay. I have kind of put that in bug reports. If you notice a really thick white ring around your ships, even when they're not selected, especially when they're stacked, that's why. If you also have an issue with that, I'd put it in Kixeye bug reports. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the build. For the weapons, it's pretty simple. You want to use the limited weapon out here, and this is the Divergence Depth Charge, Tier 13. Don't use the Tier 12 one. The range right here is 80, which should be the max range for the ship. There is a Blueprint one, which is unlimited. I don't actually have it because I just get it in the TLC when that comes out. And the only differences is look at the damage figure here. Submerged damage, or damage really, 9,750. And the limited one will be a little bit higher at 10,750. So very small, 10% difference, but limited will be better if you have it. That's what I'll use in the hash codes and stuff like that. Use the limited ones on your damage ships primarily if you have those, because these are the ones you're going to buff with your specials. And then the heavy weapon, there really is no other choices. It's the tier 13 one, again at 80 range. If you wanted to cut down and use some other stuff, there are older specials that have a 93 range, which I considered for a second, but is not really worth it. When you look at the damage, it would mess up autoing and stuff like that. I tend to want to auto at least half the targets in the raid, so that's why I'm using the tier 13 one that came out with the ship, and the damage of 27,000 is much better than 3,000 previously. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and throw on the armors. I don't really try and predict the armors and damage types anymore. I'm going to go for 2 of the explosive and 2 of the concussive. If you really wanted, you could try and predict and think, oh, we might have more concussive damage, we'll lean that way, or maybe autoing has more explosive damage that you take. You want to auto more often, so you could tilt a little bit more explosive. I don't really have the patience to try and figure that out and do that because the survival at U3 especially is so high, the change of whatever is on this armor doesn't really mean that much. By the way, this is a 65,000 survival armor. If you look at the tier 12 ones, it is about 60,000. So you could just use the tier 12 ones anyway, not even bother getting these, and you would have basically the same exact expected performance. If you are trying to save your Forsaken mission points, or you're a lower level player, don't want to spend all that points, just use the older ones. It also gives you 2% and gives you a barely noticeable loss in survival. At this point, we can go ahead and move on to the specials. Special number 1 is, surprise, surprise, going to be an engine. Use the best engine you have. The CTX-75 is the one you want to use. Here's where they've gotten kind of weird with their naming. It has 75,000 survival, and it's named the CTX-75, so guess where that name came from. If you don't happen to have this one, use another engine that has 120% combat speed, or as high as you can get it. The Darklight engine is very, very similar. Again, lower survival, but all the stats are the same. You could just use 5 of these across the fleet, or mix and match and use the highest survival ones on whatever you think your ships will be the lowest upgraded. That's pretty simple. Special slot number 2 is going to be a few of the limited ones that came out with the ship, and again, we're naming the CT for concussive 60 battery, gives you 60% concussive damage. Wonder again how they came up with that one. And splash damage reduction is nice at this point, it works better than it used to. The damage on this one is pretty nice. If you don't have the CT60, you could look at the older batteries, which are somewhere down at the bottom here in limited. Like the, open water warfare gives you 37, impact overdrive gives you a little bit more, Bushido gives you 50, and there's a few other choices out there. Find the best concussive damage special that only gives concussive damage and therefore could stack, which is probably the Iron Feather battery at plus 55%. So again, very small difference between the plus 60 and the plus 55 if you only have old stuff. Special slot number 3 is going to jump over to be the regular blueprint special that came out with this one, which is called the PDR-10. It looks kind of like a 0, but whatever. And this gives you Pierce Decay Reduction PDR of 10, which is kind of nice, although Pierce is not really going to be a primary thing used, especially if you're autoing, but even driving, Pierce tends to be pretty difficult. This works like the old railguns we have, where it hits one target, pierces through, and hits another one a little bit further away. Decay Reduction reduces the amount of damage that is lost through going through that first target. 10% is very, very small. This is mostly useful for the concussive reload, evade bonus, and combat speed. Because this does have a combat speed of plus 35, which is very high, you want to make sure you're using this on every one of your ships, even if they're going to be a countermeasure ship and not a damage ship. Okay, moving on, we want to use a few more things that are going to boost your damage on this one, because these are your damage ships. Again, I'm building 3 of them. Hexfire Gatling Barrels is a tier 12. You likely all have this one. If not, look for a high concussive damage, bonus points for Splash Special. That stacks up with everything else you have on there. Hexfire Gatling Barrels, overall solid. The concussive damage is really nice. Because these are depth charges, the splash bonus is pretty nice as well. Hexfire Gatling Barrels, which is a blueprint special. Jumping over into the limited section, we're going to put on one other that came out with the tier 12 ship, which honestly at this point I forget what it was. It was one before Mirages. And this is going to give you concussive damage and concussive reload, both of which are good. If you don't have this, jump down to the tier 11, maybe 11.5 special. Like the Shadow Strike system would do most of what this does here, but the Haywire Speedloader is just a little bit better. Okay, at this point, we've put on pretty much all the damage specials we can, and we still have one open slot. So you might be wondering, what should we put on here? Well, you could choose a variety of factors. Looking at the specials that we have on here, you can see that speed is important because we have PDR 10, which adds speed. Damage is important because this is a damaged ship. And then something like evade, we're already maxed out on and can't put something on here. The other thing that you might want to consider is speed, and by the way, TSM did a video on this one. He put on an engine upgrade special, the speed upgrade. That is a pretty good idea, and I'm going to go a slightly different direction, but if you want to put on a higher combat speed, run a lot more of a splash, you could put on engine upgrade for that last slot. Just make sure if you do that, you use it on all your ships, they all match combat speed. What I'm going to go for instead is actually going to be a concussive damage boosting special. By the way, you can't use the torpedo critical ones because these are not torpedoes, they are depth charges. What I'm going to use is going to be limited, is the blowback assembly. This gives you projectile speed, so you're going to hit the targets that are coming towards you a little bit more quickly. It gives you splash, so you hit a few more of them at once, and a decrease in spread, so your damage is more focused around one target and is therefore effectively higher, because we actually have pretty low splash here on these weapons. So this is going to be my damage build. If I did choose something else, maybe concussive upgrade is an option for just pure damage. But I think speed is probably a second choice. Just make sure it's the same on all 5 ships in the fleet. Okay, this is the damage build. It is just about maxed out in terms of weight, and that is with the heavy weapon on here, so it does work out okay. And this is going to be the final build for the 3 damaged ships. Now at this point, we have to go ahead and look at the countermeasures, what you can use on here, and as the thumbnail states, we're going to use one ship, which is going to be a Gale ship. For Gales, what you want to do here is put on as many as possible. The reason is that Gales, in comparison to something like Missile Defense System 3, can continue to fire one incoming projectile until it is completely taken down. By the way, you can't use Gales on these last 2 specials here, or last 2 weapon slots, I should say. It just locked, the hull can't support them. It only takes in regular damage, it doesn't take a countermeasure one, so that's why I still have the divergence depth charge on here. Now, because we did switch and we're using a basically 0 damage on this ship, we can take off all the damage boosting specials and put on Gale boosting specials. We have to leave on the PDR 10 munition because it gives you combat speed. We can take off the concussive battery because that's just damage, not really worried about splash damage reduction. Engine, of course, should stay on here. We can take off the Hexfire Gatling barrels. We can take off the Haywire speed reloader. And because it has no combat speed, we can take off the blowback assembly. If you did have the engine upgrade, you would want to leave that on here. And instead, what we're going to put on is specials that boost countermeasures and projectile speed, because Gales benefit tremendously from projectile speed. The best skirmish system that we want to use here for the defense system is the mirror maze defense system, because this has a little bit of concussive reload, meaning your ships that have concussive damage on them do a little bit more damage here. The important stats are the anti-mortar reload of plus 20% and the anti-mortar range of plus 75%. We can jump over to limited and look at something like the, countermeasures. We could look at something like the Paterios or the countermeasure loaders 4, and so we have very similar stats. Anti-mortar range is slightly higher, not enough to matter, and the anti-mortar accuracy, or reload here rather, anti-mortar reload is the exact same. Anti-mortar accuracy of plus 35%. We can compare that to the mirror maze and see that it's actually higher on the mirror maze, so we're going to go ahead and choose this one. But using something like Paterios or countermeasure loaders 4 would not be a bad bet for this ship. Now, Gales are a damage type of anti-explosive or anti-mortar. Those two are used interchangeably for some reason, which means we want to try and boost that, and something that's generic like a countermeasure bonus won't work on this. That being said, I am going to actually use a projectile speed special, which you might think is for countermeasures. It's not, it's just the subaquatic propellant, and this gives you projectile speed. Again, the countermeasure reload does nothing, and the cloak time does nothing because these are not submarines. This is literally just on here for projectile speed bonuses. We're also going to use a high velocity rounds, which is a great one for projectile speed. Looking right here, you can see that has plus 110%. That's very, very high. It's a great projectile speed special. It will make sure that the Gales can actually fire and hit incoming mortars. And then the last one is going to be another surprise, surprise projectile speed special. This is going to be the explosive system 4 because it gives you 43% projectile speed. Splash and spread, not too worried about. Again, there's only 2, maybe 3 weapons if you count the heavy. Now, if you are using engine upgrade, take off the lowest projectile speed special you can. I believe that would be subaquatic propellant. Again, because the countermeasure reload does nothing, you can put on engine upgrade, speed upgrade instead of that, which again, if you're doing that, you have to do it across all 5 ships right there. Okay, so that is the build for the Gale ship. It's possible you could get away with 1 fewer Gale, but why risk it? This thing's not going to do a ton of damage anyway. And if you can, get this up to U3 so that you have more projectile speed and more anti-mortar reload. If you do that, the ship will work just a little bit better. We likely have more projectile speed than we need at this point. Honestly, the plus 25% subaquatic propellant doesn't really do a lot. So again, speed might be a pretty good option for this ship. There is the Gale build, and that is going to be 1 ship in the fleet will have Gales on it. Now we also do need to use anti-torpedoes, which is Cormorants in this target, because Cormorants are actually pretty effective, and they work like Gales in that they keep shooting at something until it is taken down all the way. We're going to put the next ship in the fleet is going to have Cormorants on all these slots. The build is going to be extremely similar, except the one change we're making is taking the Mirror Maze defense system and swapping it out with the Kenjutsu defense system. That's because Kenjutsu, which came out, I think it was the Ronins it came out with, something a long time ago, gives you plus 40%, or well, doesn't really, 40% concussive accuracy, it doesn't really do anything. It's the countermeasure range and countermeasure reload. Damage type countermeasure is what the Cormorants are, so this is pretty helpful here and is good for the skirmish class as well because of the concussive and explosive survival. If you wanted to, again, you wouldn't go horrible with Mirror Maze. You can see that 75 and 100. If we scroll up to the Mirror Maze, the concussive is 75, and then the reload is only 30. So that's why I'm using the better special is Kenjutsu, but something else would not be the end of the world. It also wouldn't be the end of the world if you managed to mix these 2 countermeasures onto the same ship and get away with that. Probably 4 Gales and 5 Cormorants, something like that, although it'd be pretty difficult for you to actually shoot down everything with only half of a ship for each damage type. The way you're using this, if you're driving around correctly, you should be able to take 0 damage from torpedoes that these things can fire at, because they keep firing at torpedoes, and the high projectile speed makes them really, really effective, as we saw with the Mirage fleet. You could even, if you're getting really overwhelmed, have a second ship like this one, although at that point you're losing way too much damage, so I wouldn't even bother with that. So 1 Cormorant ship like this, 1 Gale ship like I showed you, and then 3 damage ships, one of which will be the flagship, unless it has some really weird stats in pillage. Now that's the video for you. That's the upgrade strategy in the build plan there with the 3 ships. The one thing I will say is that I am going to build a few ships as just quote-unquote core ships first, where I just build the specials that are on everything, and weapons that are on everything, which is going to be like this, and then take out the few of these things here. I'm going to build 3 ships like this one first, just in case there's any other weird changes which we're not really expecting. I'm going to build it like that, get 3 of these things going, and keep upgrading them. I spend all my physical time upgrading the fleet, and then use tokens from the TLC and FM, etc. to actually do the refits and the builds. This is the quote-unquote core build right now, which is the same everywhere. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you have any questions, go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll do my best to get back to you on these. I want to give a huge thank you to the channel members who are helping support the channel and keep videos like this one possible. If you want your name up here, again, you can click join below the YouTube video description there. With that said, and until next time, this is going to be Derpy, signing out, helping you be a better pirate.